Hi all, and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. This is another must listen to section being added to our now expanding list of shows that I hope inspires people to look and research for themselves and erase the folly of country, culture and religious divides, as all organic souls here have a common enemy. If you see this as racist, you are clearly not as awakened as you thought, and it is time that people globally found out the real truth and come together as a unified species, not mired in dogma, delusion and illusion. This is the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show, and this is From Russia with Love 5. Hi all, and welcome to part 5 of From Russia with Love. I know many of you look forward to these series, and I hope you enjoy this one just as much. Now, this series has trekked around the world from its original origin, known as the Originals, the onto the Rus, the Slavonic Aryans, through the Caucasian mountains down to the land of the Aryans, known as Iran. We've gone from the Garden of Eden in India to the priestly tribes of Cohen in Mongolia and the rise of the cult of Ra in Egypt, the plagues scorching a pathway into Europe, and the subversion of the houses, the Catholic Church, the Middle East, and eventually arriving to fulfill their Fourth Reich, not by Germans, but Zionists. Known in the Vedic texts, which are not Indian in origin, those texts are from the Rus Eons. They were known as the sub-grey race. The story goes on with this show also. I'm going to throw out a few new names into the mix surrounding who is connected with these Kali-Ma, Egyptian Ra cult and Israelites are, and who they do their bidding for. You've heard me mention the term the Brotherhood of the Snake, and briefly mentioned the Canaanites, but I'll throw in some new names of the originators of this plan. The Melchizedek line, linked with the Pleiadian Nibiru reptilians, linked with Sirius A and Sirius B, along with their cloned Zeta Greys, Alcyon and the Andromedans. All of them were using advanced weaponry from our point of view, but it's ancient in origin and advanced genetic manipulations on this world and also many others. Adam was not our creation, but their creation, along with Eve and or Lilith. That was their attempt to reseed this planet with their creations in their image, not our image. Now, after they thought they had wiped out the previous version with their deliberate flood and fash weaponry, you understand where it's coming from. Throw in Cain, Abel, Adam, Lilith, Eve, Moses, Abraham, Noah, Yahweh, Jehovah, Ashtaroth, Isis, Set, Horus, Osiris, Nut, Geb, Mart, Shem, Tut, Nefertiti, Astara, Ishtar, Marduk, Ra, Shiva, and the Felinoids and several others, who were all part of the desecration and destruction of humanity on our special vessels. It has spanned over many hundreds of thousands of years, involved in multiple galactic wars, destroyed countless planets, solar systems and beings, Only now do we have a handle on it, and an opportunity to reverse these dark forces and their satanic, not satanic, but satanic, as in set. The Melchizedek line is linked with the Christian version of Jesus, except there was no Jesus per se, but there was plenty of teachers who came and mimicked those same words that has been accredited to Jesus, like Radomir. But all evidence points to the dark cult Christian sect appointing their own deity, and they created the name Jesus, which was born out of the King James Bible of 1611. Anything before then would not have been called Jesus. There was no letter J. Now, many will not like that statement. I get that. But there is substantial evidence to back it up. But if Jesus was so important, why did they change his name? Why did the Roman Catholic Church hunt down and kill Mary Magdalene and one of their children in France, where she was being protected by the Cathars? Why did the same church and band of Templar thugs hunt down all the Cathars at Montsegur in the 1200s? Then subsequently what may have been the remnants of the Cathars, the real Templars, in the 1300s. Now, the narrative of Melchizedek, it is speculated that the story of Melchizedek is an informal insertion into the narration, and was possibly inserted in order to give validity to the priesthood and the tithes connected with the second temple of Herod. So what they're saying here is this is a flowery description of a falsehood added to their story. His name indicates he may have worshipped Zedek, who was a Canaanite deity worshipped in pre-Israelite Jerusalem. It was said he was the king of Salem and the priest of El Elyon, often translated as the Most High God. Notice it said Salem, not Jerusalem. Again, a name change which has been common throughout this series. So where did the term Jeru come from? Well, people will be surprised to know Jeru is an ancient language. Out of which country? Back where it all started in the Garden of Eden and India. Oops. El Elyon is referred to in the Hebrew scriptures as Yahweh. Now, Melchizedek claimed that God had chosen to gift Abram, not Abraham, a tenth of God's possessions of the entire human race, which at that time was consistent of 70 nations, which was described in Genesis, in the form of 7 nations of the land of Canaan, including the cities of Sodom that Abraham succeeded in saving. How can you save a city from a nuclear blast? So what God is suggesting here is some of his creations are more special than others. That is creating hierarchy, is it not? Or in the real world, it was the fake gods creating their own domain, as was the case. That whole region, the Middle East, is not any more special than several other sites globally, except it was special to the fake gods. Their spaceports were there, their portals and gates were all over that region. They created religions and became control freaks. That has wrought much damage to this world, way beyond the comprehension of most people on the planet. The Lord hath sworn and will not repent, it says. Thou art a priest for ever after the manner of Melchizedek. Well, the Lord is Anu, the Draco king. So Anu appointed Melchizedek as his priest, or Cohen. Both means the same, and indicative of that line of usurpers. Torah laws require that the Cohen priest, spelt with a K in the Torah, must be patrilineal descendant of a prior Cohen. In other words, it's bloodline games again. Keep it in the family. Like I said, the Torah spelled Cohen with a K, like Khan, which also means Cohen. All modern day Jewish names of Cohen, but it's not a name, it's a title which means priest. As the text states in regards to Melchizedek, he is a Cohen, quote unquote. These high priests have wreaked havoc wherever they went, even today in the draconian language Latin and the profession of legalese or law. The judge is not what you think. He or she is a representation of a high priest or high priestess. That is why they wear the black robes. Where else are these robes worn? Well, the aptly named House of Lords in the UK. And yet people never ask, why did he wear these robes? Well, they wear them as a tribute to their Lord, not ours. And they are the high priest minions that represent them in modern day form. Melchi means king. Zedek was a high priest and a Canaan deity worshipped in pre-Israelite Jerusalem, which is an interesting comment in and of itself. Pre-Israelite Jerusalem, suggesting, is it not, it was not their land to begin with. Melchizedek is also mentioned in the second book of Enoch. Well, of course he would be, because Enoch was another one of them, not us, as you will hear shortly. And then we come to this piece about Melchizedek. Born of a virgin. Oops, there we go again. Sophonim or Soponema, the wife of Ner, N-I-R, who just happened to be the brother of Noah. Of course, Noah came out in suspicious circumstances also when he was born. Now, Melchizedek's story in Enoch recalls some parallels with the birth of Noah. And in the Qumran text, Lamech is worried about the birth of Noah, his son, and Lamech suspects that his wife Beth-Enosh was unfaithful to him and that the conception was the work of the Watchers and the pregnancy of the Holy Ones, and it also belonged to the Nephilim. Indeed, that's what's called seeding. They've done it often throughout time. So this Melchizedek child came out from his mother after she had died and sat on the bed beside her corpse, already physically developed, clothed, was circumcised, and was speaking and blessing the Lord, and was marked with the badge of priesthood, which was something imprinted on his chest. 40 days later, Melchizedek was taken by the archangel Gabriel, Michael it says in some manuscripts, either way, not good, to the Garden of Eden, no doubt, and thus preserved from the deluge without having to be in Noah's Ark, which also suggests that the Garden of Eden was a gateway. The Qumran scrolls also indicate that Melchizedek was used as a name of the archangel Michael, interpreted as a heavenly priest. But when you look in the scriptures, Michael as Melchizedek contrasts with Belial, who is given the name of Melchi-Resha, king of wickedness. Oops, kind of fitting, is it not? Now, this badge of priesthood that he bore on his chest made him so unique that he was immediately recognized as part divine. You may not like that word, surely. And automatically qualified him for the priesthood as none other than the mark of the Nephilim, which appeared as a patch of scaly skin. It was stated that this was a sign of divinity. A patch of scaly skin is also mentioned in the Hindu classics. You do realise they are speaking of reptilian here with that passage, do you not? There is a song later in the show with a line that says, "I'm guided by this birthmark on my skin." It will be indicative. In the Mahabharata, one of the demigods, Karna, is born of the sun god Surya and an earth mother. As such, he is born clad in a coat of armour like a divine being. That coat of armour was scaly skin and reptile. Just as the Hindu sun god was Karna's father, the same may have been true of Melchizedek, who was also called Adonizedek. My Lord is Zedek. Zedek was also the Hebrew name for the Roman sun god Jupiter, which is Zeus. Noah probably carried the mark of the Nephilim also. Of course he did. All those in those biblical books were all in part or whole reptiles. And this is what I've been telling people who will listen. The Bible is their book and story, not humans' book or stories. The further you go into it with an open mind, it becomes all too clear. Just like all the emerald tablets and the scrolls, it is all their story, not ours. And why the modern day priest class, the Catholic Church, hoards them whenever they are found, so they can control what gets put out, or put out a completely different narrative or translation, which we'll come to later, who does those translations. Now, the tradition of the priesthood of Melchizedek is entirely dropped from the Old Testament, and instead they change the name and it's invested in Aaron, brother of Moses, later to be replaced by the tribe of Levi or Levites. Those are your modern day Israelites or Hivites. Now, the priesthood of Melchizedek was kept alive, however, by the Mormons, who gave this tradition precedence over all other priests in the scriptures, and part of the teachings of the Mormon Church is the Aaronic priesthood class. Aaron replaced the Melchizedek line. Yep, it's the same script again. Born of a virgin. Do people not ask why we haven't seen in real life children created by virgins? Yes, I know we now have the reintroduced technology called test tube babies. But come on, why haven't all test tube babies turned into messiahs or gods, if that was the case? So the child, Melchizedek, comes out fully formed and fully dressed out of his mother's womb, and even fully circumcised. My God, his dead mother must have been really clever to do all of that, for source sakes. I mean, Wells the Fargo, is this all about? Babies coming out fully formed, circumcised, dressed, proclaiming the Lord with scaly skin. Has anyone ever seen this take place in real life? It's sheer lunacy, and yet billions of people follow this narrative with absolute zero critical thinking, and yet have the audacity to accuse us of being conspiracy theorists and or atheists. It's completely beyond all sane and rational comprehension, and the minute you point these things out, they trot out even more irrational narratives of, oh, you're taking it too literal, they are allegories. Okay, then fine. So why are billions of people following an allegory book that's not literal then? Because if it's not literal, it's not the truth, is it? So they basically admit it's not the full truth and then defend it to the hilt. I mean, what a dichotomy that is. And yet it's completely lost on those people blindly following that program. And it is a program. Well, actually, it was an experiment, if the truth be told, of how far they can fool the humans into believing we are their gods. Yes, you heard that correct. A program that serves no one, least of all themselves. But then Melchizedek was also taken to the Garden of Eden to escape the deluge. How did they and Noah know there would be a deluge? Because their scaly ilk planned it for a reset of humanity, and then replace it with their genetic-based creations, Adam and their Eve is why. Genetically modified humans, except beneath the skin they were not human, and still aren't. Adam and Eve, who was not the first wife, it was Lilith, who were created by the Draco and the Anunnaki groups. Like I have said all along, the Bible pronounced by bull, in other words, buy into their bullshit, is not our story, but their story, with their names, their places, and their lives. Look at the term Adamu, which was the original name in Sumeria. It meant slave worker. Adamu is also given to the firstborn male in Ethiopia. No surprise there, as that was the origin of the fourth and last Garden of Eden, after another Hebrew-led exodus to that country. And it's also why that country to this day is largely ran by Jewish groups, and was also at one point the location of the Ark of the Covenant, which was removed from the sarcophagus of the pyramid. It's an energy machine. But he was taken by, Melchizedek was taken by archangels and their ascended masters. Oh my. Another description of their people, not ours. Ascended masters are those who reside in and on this planet, not outside of here. That has to stick. There is no ascended masters. You ascend master in and on the planet. So your Michaels, your Gabriels, the Uriels, Ariels, Raphaels and Joels were not your ascended masters or angels at all. They were all fake imposters. Notice like Ezekiel, they all end in L. L means God. But do people not ask how many gods there were? It's a fair question. When most religions are monotheistic, do they not ask who are the others? The answer is that all of them were their gods, not ours. So what is a god or an ascended master? Well, neither are the god in biblical or modern day terms for a start. Both are achieved by an accumulation of soul growth. If you achieve the 7 soul growth planes on Earth or any other planet, you become an ascended master. And God's real meaning means a person or a being of higher soul growth. And completely different to the term source. The problem with these beings is they wouldn't do their own work. Their inner work that leads to higher soul growth, progression. They were just content to cheat and play with genetics to piggyback on our development. All sounds eerily similar to modern day people, is it not? Maybe that is a coincidence, or maybe it's indicative. But these usurpers are egotistical maniacs, portraying themselves as God or ascended masters more likely, who refused to do their own soul growth work and just harvested off others who had and have. They were in contract and alignment with the dark spirit world beings, ensuring humanity was repeatedly snared in a loop and recycle trap of their making. So we couldn't become ascended masters in our own right and end up in service and slaves to them only. Most humans on this planet are taken over by the spirit world dark forces under contract to the Draco reptilians and their varied minions, via walk-ins or possession, unable to have real soul growth, rendered childlike, and in real terms retarded. To those who follow religion, I understand this upsets you. It's not, I don't do it to upset you. But you all have to ask your own questions and go within. You will find the answers. And the big question is, why has your God allowed that? Why does your God promote those that kill, sacrifice, and cause death and destruction with complete impunity, as stated in the Talmud? Where is your God's help for the rest of us not Hebrew? And has God really helped the Jewish people? That's the key question, because I don't think they have. They've thrown them all under the bus. The real answer is he, she, or it hasn't. Why? Because it was not and never was our God. Or to use the correct term, source. source of all that ever was, is not and never was a he, is not and never was in physical form as a separate being to you. It did and always has been inside of us all. We are all a spark of the Creator and counterparts. And if it wasn't for these disciples of evil and the Hebrew and Anunnaki peoples or beings, everyone on this planet would know those as facts by now. It is by far the most destructive thing ever witnessed on this planet, operating via originally a myriad of churches, expanding into houses, bloodlines and secret societies or otherwise. An organisation riddled with corruption, deceit, pedestry, child abuse, harvesting of both energy and souls, riddled with death, war, plagues and the ultimate deception, dark entities hiding within a human skin. Presented as human due to our genetically altered eyesight that limits most people's vision, but not all. There are some of us who can still see on the broader spectrum, much to their chagrin. We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back. This next piece, some people will have read it and be familiar with it, but there's added pieces to it, and it's called the Kalergi Plan. Now before I go into this piece, I want to make it abundantly clear. Do not make the mistake of comparing the modern day term Jews to the Israelite cult. That is their distortion to play the racist card and stifle discourse of who these entities are. Now, in the first written manifesto between 1923 and 25, the Kalergi plan was stressing that the Jews would take over the power first in Europe and then the whole world. The plan is based on a Jewish utopian racism and is referring to a Jewish master race. Now, the expression master race, with which Mr. Hitler was describing the Aryan race, was used by Mr. Kalergi to claim the Jewish supremacy in Europe and on the whole world before Hitler came onto the scene, as was covered in From Russia with Love 3 and 4. He kept using the term Jewish noble race again and again. Nobility, bloodline, same thing. Now the purpose was to form a Jewish empire. Therefore Mr. Kalergi was claiming the abrogation of the right of self-determination of the peoples. And after the nations would be destroyed by a fast migration in masses. Sound familiar? Or also, he mentioned by movements within Europe, by ethnic, remember that word, it will come up again later, separatist movements like the Catalonian separatism or like Basque separatism. And Europe should be formed in a way so the Jews could dominate it. The precondition for this should be the pretension to convert the ethnic homogeneous population into mixed groups with whites, Negroes and Asian people. You've heard that term before. The mixing goes back to From Russia with Love 1. These mestizos should have the characteristics like cruelty, infidelity and more characteristics which, according to Kalergi, should be created deliberately and which would be absolutely necessary to reach a Jewish supremacy. This is known in modern day terms as social engineering, aligned with the eugenics program which was mentioned in From Russia with Love 4. Create people with cruelty, infidelity and further characteristics deliberately, as it was stated. This is near 100 years old, remember. But let's look into Mr. Kalergi's background first, shall we? We may find some familiar names and groups mentioned in previous shows. He was born in Japan, was an Austrian-Japanese politician, and Coudenhove Kalergi was the first recipient of the Charlemagne Prize in 1950. Charlemagne, I've got that pronunciation right. No surprise there. They were mentioned in part 4 relating to the Franks, same group. Kalergi was the second son of Heinrich von Coudenhove Kalergi, an Austro-Hungarian count, again nobility. And they were a wealthy Flemish family that fled to Austria during the French Revolution. A common theme amongst these nobility: they talk all of pan-Europa and then flee when anything kicks off, as you will see later on. Now the Kalergi's family roots trace to Byzantine royalty via Venetian aristocracy. Byzantine, that came up recently. And the ancestor was Alexio Phokas Kalergis, signed the treaty that made Crete a dominion of Venice. The Byzantine computer program mentioned in the shows Clowns in Panic. It all connects. On every Good Friday, as the liturgy came to the exhortation, Oramus et pro perfidus Judaeus, quote unquote, which is let us pray for the faithless Jews. The old count rose and walked out of the church in a protest against this supposed expression of anti-Semitism. Now the reason why will become clear. During his student years, Kalergi married the famous Jewish Viennese actress Ida Roland in April 1915, and his marriage to a divorcee 13 years his senior and also a commoner caused a temporary split with the family. Aristocratic in his origins and elitist in his ideas, Kalergi identified and collaborated with such politicians as Engelbert Dollfuss, Kurt Schuschnigg, Otto von Habsburg, Miss Anna von Nazi family, Winston Churchill, no doubt, oh my, and also Charles de Gaulle. Now in December 1921 he joined the Masonic Lodge Humanitas. Sound familiar? It's all the same group. This was in Vienna. It's all there now. Nobility, check. Jewish advocate, check. Freemason, check. Just anti-Russian missing. In 1922 he co-founded the Pan-European Union with Archduke Otto von Habsburg as the only way of guarding against an eventual world hegemony by Russia. Anti-Russian? Check. All complete. And in 1923 he published a manifesto entitled Pan-Europa, and each copy containing a membership form which invited the reader to become a member of the Pan-Europa movement. Now he favoured social democracy as an improvement on the feudal aristocracy of the sword, but his ambition was to create a conservative society that superseded democracy with the social aristocracy of the spirit. bring in the demons. European Freemason lodges supported his movement, including the Lodge Humanitas. And one has to ask, is the Humanitas charity, like the Shriner charity, a Freemasonic lodge collection fund? You research and find out for yourselves. Pan-Europa was translated into the languages of European countries, excluding Italian, which edition was not published at the time, and a multitude of other languages except one country, Russia. Now, according to his autobiography, at the beginning of 1924, his friend Baron Louis de Rothschilds, oh my, introduced him to Max Warburg, oh my, who offered to finance his movement for the next 3 years and gave him 60,000 gold marks. Rothschildians and Warburgs, oh dear. All the dots are starting to connect now, doesn't it? Warburg remained sincerely interested in the movement for the remainder of his life and served as an intermediate for the clergy with influential Americans such as banker Paul Warburg and the financier Bernhard Baruch. Now, the Nazis, which were in 2 parts, as you all have heard in the previous series, part, the Nazis considered the Pan-European Union to be under the control of Freemasonry. And in 1938, a Nazi propaganda book, Die FRWL, was released in Germany, and it revealed Kalergi's membership of Freemasonry, which was an organisation that was suppressed by the Nazis. So not only did Hitler ban the Teutonic Knights, but also Freemasonry as well. Is that not kind of contradictory against the narrative we've been fed? After the annexation of Austria by the Third Reich in 1938, Kalergi then fled to Czechoslovakia and then to France. And as France fell to Germany in 1940, he escaped then to the United States by the way of Switzerland, no surprise there, and Portugal, again no surprise there. And a few days after his successful escape to the United States, he then listened to a radio show announcing the possibility that he died. In other words, they announced he was dead so he could carry on underground. And it's a typical narrative that of them disappearing into the background, announced as dead, and the minute the heat is turned on them, they disappear. Now, during World War II, he continued his call for the unification of Europe along the Paris-London axis. Well, he would, wouldn't he, given both Paris and London was ran by his Rothschildian friends, both of them. And his appeal for the unification of Europe also enjoyed some support from Winston Churchill, Alan Dulles, and also Wild Bill Donovan. Oh my, here comes the OSS and Langley boys. In an interview in the first Pan-European Congress in 1926, Kalergi expressed the support of Jews by the Pan-European movement and the benefits to Jews with the elimination of racial hatred and economic rivalry brought by the United States of Europe. Oh my, Alan Dulles, later to become the head of CIA. The United States of Europe, oh my. An American thinks the United States is them, and it is the only United States. Nope, that was all started in the Congress of Vienna in 1815. Now, much earlier than Hitler, it was Kalergi, with his opinion, who stated the high performance of the white race, especially the Nordic subrace. But contrary to Mr. Hitler, Kalergi did not want a conservation and a reinforcement of these races, but he wanted their destruction. By these reasons, he pretended to enrich the creation, because he was right to mean that by the crossing of races, the talents and the wonderful characteristics of these races could then be eliminated. It's all there, what I've stated in parts 1 through 4. The mixing of races devalues each race. Now, despite of his positive evaluation of these races, he invented the project of extinction only, because he meant that humans would be needed, which would be more manipulable when the Jews could take over power. So he didn't want to erase them all at one go. And again, this is all about the eugenics program that was covered in part 4. Again, it's talking about how we should not mix the races, and this has nothing to do with racism, zero, and everything to do with each colour having different genetics. My understanding is the different colours came as refugees from different planets following a multi-galactic wide war. In the present times, we find other terms in the American media referring to a colonization of Afghanistan and of Iraq. And these are two examples and proofs which show that the ideas of Kalergi are more and more distributed than people think. The matter is about forming of nations, and means more or less that the artificial creation of nations, which then should serve the humans. This is why they've changed all the names and broken them all up. Now, concerning the idea of Kalergi about the mestizo humans by blood, mestizo is spelled M-E-S-T-I-Z-O, a big knowledge about the development history and about breeding of races can be found, which agree on some points in quite an astonishing way with the science of who? Darwin. It's all the same program. And with the theories of the Third Reich, it is stated, except the Third Reich had not even started when Kalergi was spouting this diatribe. All the modern science which is promoted above all by Israel, which can distinguish Jews from their cousins, Arabs, by DNA analysis, is confirming the knowledge of Kalergi without finding out the origins of his wisdom. Already in 1923, Mr. Kalergi was the head of a group of Freemasons. And this dark person was proclaiming that Europe would be dominated by a Jewish aristocrat race. To attain that aim, the Europeans, it was stated by Kalergi, would have to be crossbred with Negroes and with Asians, as the matter would be about animals. His words, not mine. All very Israel Cohen and the Kalimar from India. That is it not? From these crossbreeds, Kalergi stated, was awaiting a lower class of the human race, which could be governed more easily and would be without character. In other words, zombies. Under his followers of the first beginning, there were the Czech politicians Thomas Masaryk and Edvard Beneš, and also the banker, yet again, Max Warburg, he who gave the first 60,000 German marks for the project. And he was also supported by the Austrian Chancellor Ignaz Scipio, and later the Austrian President Karl Renner did lead this pan-European movement. Now, Kalergi himself indicated that the noble French politicians would support his movement for suppressing a German revenge movement. Again, that's kind of contradictory. Supporting one thing, meaning another. In this way, they were all involved with the manoeuvres of the conspirators. The first was the French President Edouard Herriot and his government, and also the British leaders of all political directions, among them the editor-in-chief of the London Times, no surprise, Mr. Noel Baker, and finally even Winston Churchill did accept to be seduced into this programme. In 1926, Kalergi was in the USA, again for some conferences where he convinced, with all kindness, the American public opinion of the plan of the Jewish governance of Europe. Here he found two new followers, French Foreign Minister Aristide Briand and German Chancellor Stresemann. And in the same year, Edvard Beneš was nominated to be the honour president, and he just happens to be the same man who was organising the later genocide of 300,000 Germans from Sudetenland. Nice chap. Kalergi was known until these days, who was an unknown until these days, was also negotiating with Mussolini with the intention to limit the right of self-determination of the Austrians, to prefer the victory of nations of First World War without end. But Mr. Mussolini was not declining. First World War without end. Does that sound familiar? Noble Zionist Jews following Kalergi's plan was Adenauer, John Foster Dulles, Robert Schuman, Depp Asprey, Paul Henry Spack, Helmut Kohl, German president, supposed to be a Nazi. Well, he is a Nazi, he's just not German. Because Nazi is NA, National, ZI, Zionist. Nothing to do with Germany. And also Jean-Claude Juncker. Now, many high politicians of the 20th century were in this group, among them especially Mr. Konrad Adenauer, additionally the former Minister of Justice of Spain, Mr. Rios, John Foster Dulles, CIA, and not respecting the basis of democracy, he said, and with the help of the New York Times and also the New York Herald Tribune. Mr. Kalergi submitted his plans to the American Congress. His contempt for the principle of popular government was stated in a phrase in 1966 when he was remembering his post-war period activities. The following 5 years of the pan-European movement did not concentrate principally only to this subject. Parliaments were mobilised, so the governments were strengthened for the creation of the pan-Europe, he stated. In other words, the governments were taken over by this group. With the help of Robert Schuman, the French foreign minister with high Jewish ancestry, Kalergi succeeded in robbing the German population, its reign over German steel production, iron production and coal production. And then all this production was then put in charge of a supernatural control, multinational corporations. Sound familiar, America? Of how our manufacturing industries all just vanished. History repeats unless we stop it. But that's what this Jewish noble race did to the German people, and what facilitated Hitler throwing out the Rothschild bankers. Mr. Des Asperi, the traitor with the self-determination of Tyroleans in South Tyrol, and Henry Paul Spaak, the Belgian socialist leader pretending to create peace between the Germans and the French, just not regarding their heirs of Clemenceau, who had formulated the genocide plans for Versailles. Again, Kalergi's basic paper was creating a multicultural Europe, destroying more and more of the power of the parliaments and of the governments. Is kind of valid up until today, is it not? It still goes on. And it is expressed in the Coudenhove-Kalergi Prize, which was given to Helmut Kohl, thanking him for following the plan. So the Freemason and powerful European politician Mr. Jean-Claude Juncker, who was the Prime Minister of another fake country called Luxembourg, was flattered with this prize. And Kalergi was propagating pacifism again and again, which required for the peace of nations, but at the same time he permitted Jewish brutal force. Laws for one, laws for another. He supported the only declaration about equality before the law until the actual Jewish system would be abrogated, and this is called as abrogation of unjust inequality. So by the takeover of power by the noble Jewish race, as they're called, which will be created by the equality, this equality will be abrogated then, and since then the Jews are working to reinforce their power over the non-Jews by a justified inequality, quote unquote. Well, this Jewish clique is also underestimating laws and paragraphs which are defining a country, and which are also needed for the existence of a country when the matter is about to attack other populations. Mr. Kalergi declared to the incompetent people, it was said, to govern themselves. Yeah, right. And from this point on, he proclaims a new world order. And people thought that started with Bush Sr. With the global abrogation of democracy, the Jews are pretending to bring peace, culture and food to mankind, stating only the ones who are from happy descent from the noble Jewish race are qualified to conduct mankind. That's what he stated. It was praised that the Jews were the leaders of socialism, communism and capitalism. Not only were they the leaders, it was they who created it. And this provoked the viewpoint of the National Socialists and of the Fascists. Problem, reaction, solution in full flow. Now, the big Jewish influence in Soviet and the US government, or in the secret services, can be proved easily. 37% of the members of NKVD are of ethnic Jewish origin, above all in the higher leaders' ranks, whereas in general and in proportion to the exaggerated participation with these ideologies, the Jews always remain a minority. When Mr. Kalergi presented his plan back in 1923, praising himself as a communist, capitalist Jewish leader, the Bolsheviks had already killed millions of their political enemies. He stated he wants to see a unified gunpowder, gold and ink in the hands of the Jewish supreme race. In general, this piece confirms a Jewish thirst of power, as only the anti-Semitic people were recognising it. Now, back in World War I, Germany and their allies publicly called for peace negotiations with their enemies in 1916, stating no specific conditions or demands, as a financially drained France and Great Britain were about to accept this proposal, but finally refused. Why? Because in the meantime they received a promise from the Rothschilds that the US would enter the war, despite President Woodrow Wilson's campaign promising to stay out of it. What was the promise? The US entering the war is what the UK obtained from the Rothschilds in exchange for the Balfour Declaration. So in essence, American people was pushed into war so that Israel can create a false country in the Middle East. After the usual required false flags aiming at manipulating the American public opinion, compromised President Wilson fulfilled the Rothschild prophecy. Like I've said with these people, there is no prophecies in the scriptures, Bibles or any of that. It's all plans, it's all pre-written. And entered the war, defeated the Germans, and unlike the outcome the Germans were offering in 1916, huge war compensations were paid here and there to the Rothschilds' great joy. So he collected off both sides. After World War I, with the help of assets like Churchill, the Rothschilds actively lobbied the reluctant UK political infrastructure to get the Balfour Declaration to be enforced in the most detrimental way possible for the local Arab populations. But it will only be after World War II that the Rothschilds, thanks to their new Bretton Woods toolbox, will enjoy the UN partition plan for Palestine on November the 29th, 1947, which finally led to the establishment of the State of Israel on May 14th, 1948. And it was designated to be for justification purposes and to efficiently populate their new playground, and the Rothschilds cabal organised the usual false flags and propaganda both during and after World War II. We'll be back shortly. Hi all and welcome back. Mr. Kalergi, oh my, laid it all out. Talk about Darwinism, eugenics, mixing races, etc., etc., and the takeover of this Jewish noble race, which must not be misinterpreted as the modern day Jews. These are the different peoples altogether, or beings in some cases. They also wrote another document, which they've gone to great lengths on Go and other search engines to deny, but it is real. pardon the pun. It's called the Secret Covenant, Protocols of Zion. An illusion it will be, so large, so vast, it will escape their perception. Those who will see it will be thought of as insane. We will create separate fronts to prevent them from seeing the connection between us. We will behave as if we're not connected to keep the illusion alive. Our goal will be accomplished one drop at a time, so as to never bring suspicion upon ourselves, and this will also prevent them from seeing the changes as they occur. Totalitarian creep. We will always stand above the relative field of their experience, for we know the secrets of the Absolute. We will work together always, and will remain bound by blood and secrecy. Death will come to he who speaks. We will keep their lifespan short and their minds weak while pretending to do the opposite. We will use our knowledge of science and technology in subtle ways so that they will never see what is happening. We will use soft metals, aging accelerators and sedatives in food and water, also in the air. They will be blanketed in poison everywhere they turn. The soft metals will cause them to lose their minds. We will promise to find a cure from our many fronts, yet we will feed them more poison. The poisons will be absorbed through their skin and mouths. They will destroy their minds and reproductive systems. From all this, their children will be born dead, and we will conceal this information. The poisons will be hidden in everything that surrounds them, in what they drink, eat, breathe, and wear. We must be ingenious in dispensing the poisons, for they can see far. We will teach them that the poisons are good, with fun images and musical tones. Those they look up to will help. We will enlist them to push our poisons. They will see our products being used in film and will grow accustomed to them and will never know their true effect. When they give birth, we will inject poisons into the blood of their children and convince them it's for their help. We will start early on when their minds are young. We will target their children with what children love the most, sweet things. When their teeth decay, we will fill them with metals that will kill their mind and steal their future. When their ability to learn has been affected, we will create medicine that will make them sicker and cause other diseases, for which we will create yet more medicine. We will render them docile and weak before us by our power. They will grow depressed, slow and obese, and when they come to us for help, we will give them more poison. We will focus their attention towards money and material goods so that the many never connect with their inner self. We will distract them with fornication, external pleasures and games so that they may never be one with the oneness of it all. Their minds will belong to us, and they will do as we say. If they refuse, we shall find ways to implement mind-altering technology into their lives, and we will use fear as our weapon. We will establish their governments and establish opposites within. We will own both sides. We will always hide our objective, but carry out our plan. They will perform the labour for us, and we shall prosper from their toil. Our families will never mix with theirs. Our blood must be pure always, for it is the way. We will make them kill each other when it suits us. We will keep them separated from the oneness by dogma and religion. We will control all aspects of their lives and tell them what to think and how. We will guide them kindly and let them think they are guiding themselves. We will foment animosity between them through factions. When a light shall shine among them, we shall extinguish it by ridicule or death, whichever suits us best. But if they ever find out that they are our equal, we shall perish them. This they must never know. If they ever find out that together they can vanquish us, they will take action. They must never ever find out what we have done, for if they do, we shall have no place to run. For it will be easy to see who we are once the veil has fallen. Oops. Our actions will have revealed who we are, and they will hunt us down, and no Persian shall give us shelter. This is the secret covenant by which we shall live the rest of our present and future lives, for this reality will transcend many generations and lifespans. This covenant is sealed by blood, our blood, we the ones who from heaven to earth came. Isn't that the same as the Anunnaki? Oh my. This covenant must never ever be known to exist. It must never ever be written or spoken of. For if it is, the consciousness it will spawn will release the fury of the Prime Creator upon us, and we shall be cast to the depths from whence we came, and remain there until the end of time of infinity. Unbelievable, literally unbelievable. Sure are. Before the next music break, we're going to cover two topics, two chapters, and the first one is Hebrew terms and traditions, and we're going to look deeply into that. We are often told things out of the Bible that were never said. It did not say God made man. It says let us, being plural, which destroys monotheism, does it not? In our image. But who is us and what is our? Now in the Jewish traditions and books we also hear the term Rosh Hashanah, and in its current meaning as a Jewish holiday, and yet it does not appear in the Torah. Now the Jewish believe that the Rosh Hashanah represents either figuratively or literally God's creation ex nihilo, out of nothing. But in Jewish law there are 4 major new years that are observed, each one marking a beginning of sorts. Now the lunar month Nisan, usually corresponding to the months March and April in the Gregorian calendar, is when a new year is added to the reign of the Jewish kings, and it marks the start of the year for the 3 Jewish pilgrimages. And its injunction is expressly stated in the Hebrew Bible, quote, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. However, ordinary years, sabbatical years, jubilees, and dates inscribed on legal deeds and contracts are reckoned differently. Such years begin on the first day of the lunar month Tishri, which usually corresponds to September-October in the Gregorian calendar. Now, the reckoning of Tishri as the beginning of the Jewish year began with the early Egyptians, not the Jewish people, and was preserved by the Hebrew nation. So yet again confirming these people's books, traditions all came out of Egypt, not Jerusalem. Now, their injunction is expressly stated in the Hebrew Bible, quote, 3 times in the year you shall keep a feast unto me. The feast of unleavened bread, which is Passover. Unleavened bread is that which is made without rising agents such as yeast. Then you have the feast of harvest. Oh my. Shavuot, all very Ra and the Lord of One, that. And the feast of ingathering, Sukkot, which is at the departing of the year. And it says in the Exodus, at the departing of the year implies that the new year begins here, which is October the 20th, not January the 1st. Now, in Jewish liturgy, Rosh Hashanah leads to Yom Kippur, which is described as the Day of Judgment, Yom Hadin, and the Day of Remembrance, Yom HaZikaron. Now, the word Zikaron, the Hebrew word, means a sacrificial term that brings the offerer into remembrance before God, or brings God into favourable remembrance with the offerer. Sacrifice again. And it refers to something given in time and space, which is the point of reference and contact between man and the Absolute, between man and God. In this case, man's actions in the form of a sacrifice offered in the context of liturgical celebration. It's like the temple stuff again. So there we have those two terms again that go side by side in the Hebrew narrative, God and sacrifice. This is the Kalimah worship people again, whereby humans had to sacrifice their fellow man to the god or the dark mother. But I thought these gods were supposed to be the highest upon high, the Almighty, the All-Knowing, packed with wisdom, and yet ask us to sacrifice people? Oh my. I think I'll do without that type of God. Thank you very much. There is more evidence of who their God was when at Mount Sinai God made a covenant sealed in blood with the people of Israel by giving the 10 words, the law. Covenant means to bind, in this case by blood. So God bound the Israelites by blood. And it's very important to notice how the covenant text is introduced. It does not start with thou shalt not, that is, with man's obligations. Rather, it begins what God has already done. Quote, I am the Lord who is now, was, Anu, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage, unquote. Then follow all the thou shalt not, starting with the first word, thou shalt not have no other gods before me. In other words, all must bow down to Anu. This was a contract to accept a new God that was not Source, and the Israelites took the seducement, exactly like the Australian New Zealand tribes did 16,500 years ago. In Hebrew, Yom Kippur means Day of Atonement, which lasts for 25 hours, and during this time you can't eat, drink, work or drive, among other prohibitions. Now, refraining from these activities symbolically represents a return to the pristine state. In other words, this is saying it doesn't matter what the Jewish people have done all year round, they on Yom Kippur can wipe their slates clean and start again. That's not source or cosmic law. Now, some midrashic descriptions depict God as sitting upon a throne, while books containing the deeds of all of humanity are opened for review, and each person passes in front of him for evaluation of his or his deeds. Now, the Talmud provides three central ideas behind the day: sitting on the throne, which was Moloch, the sacrifice god in both temples, and a fake god who wasn't even human. And this is where the origin of the Western myth of some bearded man sitting on a cloud passing judgment on us all, except the Jewish, it seems. And all of it is a fear program, which sadly pervades right throughout society to this day. Now, the Jewish calendar is based on the lunar cycle. Well, it would do. This is Lilith again, and the Dark Mother worship. That these harvesting agents then bound the females of this planet via genetics to the moon, as the blood female period cycle is the same length as the orbit of the moon, bound by blood. And you wonder why females go off balance every 4 weeks, or why violence, aggression, crime, and even in the myths that werewolves appear on the full moon. There's your answer. People go nutty or into lunatics. Lunar means moon, tick means parasite. So that the first day of each month originally began with the first sighting of the new moon, and the word month originates from the original term of moonth. And since the 4th century, it's been arranged so that Rosh Hashanah never falls on a Sunday, supposed to be the Sabbath day, Wednesday or Friday. Next category is Mormons and the cult of Ra. The Torah, or is it to Ra, morphed into the Talmud, which then created Christianity. Jesus was not a Christian or a member of any church, which then created the Catholics. Out of that came a Muslim sect. Muslims were Catholics who wished to go on a separate path, all encouraged by the upper order, as that creates divide and conquer and the potential for later wars. Also out of the Catholics came Protestants. These people are protesting Catholics. It was never a religion. Then in came further derivatives like Baptist, Methodist, Episcopal, which would be no surprise to hear their headquarters is in New York, and a whole heap of other type of religious orders as well. And then in came another group that again originated in New York. and were subsequently thrown out, which is a familiar pattern throughout history, that, only to go on an epic trek across the country of America and arrive in Salt Lake City. All eerily reminiscent of the Exodus, is it not? You see, his story always repeats. Now, the Mormons were pretending to be separate from all others and a whole new religion until you look deeper. Joseph Smith, one of the founders of that cult, said the Book of Mormon was translated from writing on the golden plates in a reformed Egyptian language. Oops. Translated with the assistance of Urim and Thummim and seer stones. Now, Urim and Thummim were two unknown objects that were worn on the breastplate. Who wore those breastplates? The Jewish high priests. It's the dark priesthood class again. And both the special spectacles and the seer stone were at times referred to Urim and Thummim. Now, Smith said an angel, more likely a demon, first showed him the location of the plates in 1823, buried in a nearby hill, but he was not allowed to take the plates until 1827. Nice 4-year loop gap there. And Smith began dictating the text of the Book of Mormon around the fall of 1827 until the summer of 1828, when suddenly, just by chance, 116 pages were lost. Said to have been lost by Martin Harris, who incidentally was born in New York as well. Oh dear. But it's a common theme throughout biblical scriptures, or libraries, is it not? Shit goes missing, or created fires. No, they removed those 116 pages to cover stuff up and stop people finding out what this was all really about. Translation began again in April 1829 and finished in June of 29, saying that he translated it by the gift and power of God. Now, Oliver Cowdery acted as a scribe for the majority of the translation during Smith's supposed possession, and we have found out that very few people were allowed to witness the plates. Again, another common theme. Even after the translation was completed, Smith said the plates were returned to the angel. Oh dear. And people fell for this bullshittery. Created a mini empire out of a group of Egyptian plates. Really? Plates that hardly anyone saw and no one can verify to this date. Plates that was received and returned to an angel. I mean, what type of drivel is that? Now, the book described itself as a chronicle of an early Israelite diaspora, integrating with the pre-existing indigenous peoples of the Americas, written by a people called the Nephites. Now, the Nephites are one of 4 groups, along with the Lamanites, Jaredites, hello Mr. Kushner, and Mulekites, described to be in the Book of Mormon as having settled in the ancient Americas. Lamanites described as one small tribe among many in the ancient Americas, a tribe that intermarried with the indigenous Native Americans. In other words, they were not native. A tribe that descended from modern Asia, from a common nomadic ancestry. Lamanites are described as having received a skin of blackness to distinguish them from Nephites. This description, when I found it, blew my mind. as it essentially proves what I've said all along. The term Indians comes not from America, but the exodus of the people that were thrown out of the Garden of Eden in India, who intermarried with the natives of America. Indians, or to use the correct term, Lamanites, went across the land bridge into Alaska and down into modern day America. Now Molech, so it all ties in, the Molechites, was the son of Zedek, where the origin of Melchizedek comes from. Melchi means my king, Zedek the king of Salem, not Jerusalem. Now according to the Book of Mormon, Lehi family left Jerusalem at the urging of God circa 600 BC and later sailed to the Americas 589 BC, which is a lie in and of itself, as Jerusalem wasn't there then. The Nephites are described as descendants of the Nephi, the fourth son of the prophet Lehi, and the Nephites are portrayed as having a belief in Christ hundreds of years before his birth. Oops. Now, historical accuracy and veracity of the Book of Mormon was and continues to be hotly contested to this day. There is absolutely no archaeological evidence, no linguistic or other evidence of the use of Egyptian writing in ancient America has been discovered, except that it was. It's in the Grand Canyon. Same peoples. Now, to avoid confrontation with New York residents, the members moved to Kirtland, Ohio, and hoped to establish a permanent, quote, New Jerusalem, or City of Zion in Jackson County, Missouri. However, they were expelled from Jackson County in 1833 and fled to other parts of Missouri in 1838. Joseph Smith taught that the indigenous peoples of the Americas were members of some of the lost tribes of Israel. No, they were the Kalimar worshippers out of India and the cult of Ra in Egypt, not the country of Israel, which never existed until 1948. Later he taught that Mormons were Israelites. Yes, you are. And that they may learn of their tribal affiliation within the 12 Israelite tribes. The Mormon affinity for Judaism is expressed by the many references to Judaism in the Mormon liturgy. For example, Smith named the largest Mormon settlement he founded Nauvoo, N-A-U-V-O-O, which means to be beautiful in Hebrew. Brigham Young named a tributary of the Great Salt Lake the Jordan River, which, as stated in From Russia with Love 4, it is where the so-called Exodus ended, in Jordan, not Jerusalem, and was called Ammon, as in Ammon-Ra. The modern-day city is now called Amman. See how they just change one letter around? Oh, it gets lost in the translation. Yeah, right. Another name for Horus is Jor, J-O-R. Add in Dan and the tribal reference to tribes of Dan, and there you have another distortion of names and history, Jordan. The LDS Church created a new writing scheme called the Deseret alphabet, which was based in part on Hebrew. And the LDS Church has a Jerusalem Centre in Israel where students focus their study on Near Eastern history, culture, language, and also the Bible. Now, other connections between the Mormons and the cult of Ra is their chronic abuse of children. They can deny their rampant sexual abuse all they like to outsiders, but this person knows different, having spoken to quite a few within that community. And it is not just a case that they share wives. Remember, the state of Utah was delayed as becoming part of the state due to their sexual infidelity, but they share their children around in sex parties also within the community. And then we have their obsession with gold. Same as Egypt. Mormons have the largest holding of gold in America. The largest. A fair proportion of which came out of the Grand Canyon due to underground connections also prevalent in that community. Hello, Dugway. Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith and Brigham Young were all high-degree Freemasons and from the Merovingian bloodline, which is Anunnaki. Oops. Hi all and welcome back. This next chapter is called Word Magic Hebrew Translated. It connects a lot of the dots. A bit like the legalese. You can't make sense of it because it's been misinterpreted so that we don't. A picture appeared recently on a page published in the New York Times. No surprise, given what it was stated in previously, that paper was used as part of a drive to socially engineer people. And it was just after the end of World War One, and someone decided to build a monument, and they built monuments out of German helmets. Quite where they got so many thousands of German helmets and transferred it to New York is beyond me. But what shape was it built in? Given America won the war, was it an American flag, a bald eagle, something else symbolising America? No, it was a pyramid. Of all the shapes, it had to be a pyramid, and this is what I've been saying throughout this series. They've taken over the whole of the Western world with this Egyptian cult, and New York is the epicenter. Israel, the modern day term Israelite, and Jews are its front sleight of hand move. People will blame the Jews and Israel when it's nothing to do with either, and it's everything to do with this Egyptian cult expansion. Salt Lake City is built around the temple. Anything with the word temple in is referencing Egypt, Ra and Solomon. That goes right across the globe. And it's all done by the Freemasons. Who controls finance? The Temple Bar section, Temple Bar, of the city of Babylon. This is the centre of the crown. That has got nothing to do with the Queen or royalty. We are specifically referencing the established Templar Church, known for centuries by the world as the Crown. The Crown, also known as the Crown Temple or the Crown Templar, all three being synonymous. King James, who wrote the modern day Bible, replete with the letters J, was a Crown Templar. Connecting the dots now. The Temple Church was built by the Knights Templar in two parts, the round and the chancel, which probably morphed into the chancellery, which is all about money, which is what the Templars were, remember, the first bankers. And the round church was consecrated in 1185 and modelled after the circular church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Now the chancel was built in 1240 in the UK, and when you remember the hymn, "And was Jerusalem builded here in England's green and pleasant land," makes more sense now. The Temple Church serves as both the inner and middle temples and is located between Fleet Street, which houses the UK media, no surprise there, and the Victoria Embankment at the Thames River. And its grounds also house the Crown offices at Crown Office Row. Now this Temple Church is outside any canonical jurisdiction. The master of the temple is appointed and takes his place by sealed, non-public patent, without induction or institution. In other words, self-appointed. Now the present Queen of England is not the Crown, as we've all been led to believe. Rather, it's the bankers and the attorneys who are the actual Crown or Crown Temple. Now the monarch aristocrats of England, who have not been ruling sovereigns since the reign of King John, 1215, which is when those temples were built. All royal sovereignty of the old British Crown since that time has passed to the Crown Temple in Chancery. And yet some people think the Magna Carta signed by King John is for the benefit of the peoples. No, it was the Crown. He signed everything over, including the people, to this Egyptian Israelite cult, is what he did. It was the Knights of the Temple of Solomon who pushed King John to sign off on the Magna Carta. Who controls all the legal aspects? The Temple Bar again, called a British Accreditation Registry, of which all Americans are still subject to British law and rule. Which means the Independence Day you just celebrated is 100% fake. Bar means to fasten, block, prevent, or used in a gate. What is at the entrance of the Temple Bar in London? A gate. The Queen of England requires permission to enter that region. Now, bar became a body of lawyers in 1600. Bar is also used in a courtroom. It is the rail separating the judge, the high priest, who is then approached by a barrister. The etymology for rister escapes me, but you can bet your bottom dollar there's something involved in it. Then we have the mark of the beast, known as the barcode. The term debar, which means to exclude. In essence, we are barred from them, and their inner temple control system is what they're saying. Unless you're a high-ranking member of the Freemasons and their worship of all things Egyptian mashed into modern-day Hebrewism or Jews. Even their symbol of the justice scales placed everywhere legal is again a reference to Thoth, Egypt, and the cult of Ra. The weighing of the heart. Same cult. Bar mitzvah, Mitzvah means commandment. He commanded to be bound. Oops. Hallelujah means praise or hail Jehovah or Yahweh. All sing along now. Females are not going to like this next one. Beulah means married woman, but Beulah is the feminine past particle of Baal. He married, which means all women are married under contract to Baal. Culture originally is a harvesting term. The origin was preparing the crops yet to be harvested. Humans to some are considered as crops to be harvested. Still think your culture is to be proud of. Bel is another derivative of Baal, like the festival Beltane. Bel is Baal and Tane is fire. Oops. Remember the fire pit in the Temple of Solomon? That is what you are celebrating. Child sacrifice. Let's all dance around like prats round the maypole, shall we? Layla, You Got Me on My Knees, famous song by Clapton, except Layla is a tribute to Lilith. Layla means night and the moon. Another line in the song, before I finally go insane, aka lunatic, Luna being the operative word. Now supposedly that song was written based on a Persian poem in the 500s, a love story involving a non-consummation narrative. There's that born of a virgin again. Of course, Lilith is known as Adam's first wife compared to Eve. Jericho comes from the word Yarakea, which means moon or month. Month derives from the word moon. And Jericho is related as an old moon cult again, Lilith. The origin of the word Holocaust and its meaning in the 13th century was sacrificed by fire and burnt offering. What was the brazen altar called in Solomon's temple that sacrificed children to Moloch? The altar of burnt offerings. It was not until 1957 that it was referenced by that name for what happened in the concentration camps. 12 years later. Covenant. An agreement or contract that is bound. Remember God coming down with the contract that was bound in blood. But what is the Hebrew word for covenant? Testament. Oops. Why would a so-called God's book, old or new, be a contract to bind to? Please explain that. Ethnic. Mentioned it earlier. The original meaning was pagan or heathen, which is a term used to describe non-Hebrew and its derivative Christian. Oops, derivative Christian. And it comes from the Greek word ta ethne, which translates in Hebrew as goyim. Ethnic means goyim. Ethnic cleansing makes much more sense now, doesn't it? You know the word origin. All the goyim, to be ethnically cleansed. Baptized was originally pronounced baptized. Bapa means father, tized means to make definite. Contractual changes that have been definitized, or in other words, bound to the father, who is the Lord, Anu, or Baal. So not only are you married to Baal, you are bound to Baal by being baptized. Registered, reg means king, registered to the king, which then became Marduk. So Marduk owned everybody. Everything contract we signed was bound to Marduk. Tetragrammaton, the Hebrew name of God, transliterated in 4 letters as YHWH or JHVH, and is articulated as Yahweh or Jehovah. Well, Jehovah never existed until at least 1600s, when the letter J came out. Tetra means 4. Gram means letters. And their real hidden god, out of Egypt again, Aton, of which NATO is a deliberate anagram. Who does NATO want to attack? Russia. Seen the picture now? So it started off as 4 letters, YHWH. So how did that morph into Yahweh or Jehovah? And here is why. The Masoretes were a group of Jewish scribe scholars who worked between the 6th and 10th centuries CE, based primarily in early medieval Palestine, in the cities of Tiberias and Jerusalem, as well as in Iraq, Babylonia. Each group compiled a system of pronunciation and grammatical guides in form of diacritical notes, called niqud, on the external form of the biblical text in an attempt to standardize the pronunciation, paragraph and verse divisions, and the cantillation of the Jewish Bible, the Tanakh. It was scribed for the worldwide Jewish community. Now, one of the frequent cases was the Tetragrammaton, which, according to later Jewish practices, should never be pronounced, only read as Adonai, which means my Lord. There's Anu again. Or, if the previous or next word already was Adonai, as Elohim, the combination produces non-words that would spell Yehovah and Yehovah, respectively. And then we come to further notifications, and according to traditions, the truth of the Kabbalah were known to Adam. Well, he would do. Same people, same species. Quote, what his mind held, no mind since has been able to conceive. I'm not surprised either. Like I said, he's not one of us, is why. Adam was their creation, not ours, after another reset of humanity. and yet it was said he was able to transmit a glimmer of his knowledge to a few of the great souls that descended from him, such as Hanok and Methuselah. It was stated they were the Grand Masters. There's that Templar reference again. Who taught Noah, who in turn taught his own students, including Abraham. Abraham studied in the academy of Noah's son Shem, and sent his son Isaac to study there after him. Isaac in turn sent his son Jacob to study with Shem, and with Shem's great-grandson Eber. Now the Kabbalah is the book of demons and incantations, stated to be the tree of life and the macabre, but it actually is very macabre, and it's the tree of death, as in Darth. One of the secret signs of the Kabbalah is to get your index finger and middle finger and join them together. Then get the ring finger and the little finger and do the same. Then separate between the middle and ring fingers with the two fingers either side still joined together. And then you have the popular Vulcan sign done in Star Trek by Mr. Spock. Oh dear. It's all in your face when you find out the real truth. Spock was also Jewish, I understand. We are told these well-known names in the Bible and the Scriptures were all human. In my opinion, they're not. But let's look at how long they lived during their time here. Adam, we're told, was cast out into the wilderness, but he seemed to do rather well for himself in the so-called wilderness all on his own, as Adam lived to 930. Methuselah, son of Enoch, the grandson of Noah, lived to 969. Noah himself lived for 950 years. Abraham lived to 175. Shem lived to 600 plus years. Shem's son Isaac lived to 180. And Isaac's son Jacob lived to 147. While the grandson Eber lived for 464 years. So you have to ask yourself with an open mind here. Why would they? Remember, they had the mark of priesthood, the scaly skin, all of them. Why would they, living to 600 to 900 years plus, and yet we're lucky with all the so-called modern technology to live to just 80? Something is seriously amiss here with critical thinking, not mine, in religiosity. His story has lied to its teeth at us with their bullshit story of God's chosen ones, people living to 900, bushes spontaneously going on fire, and then worse, talking to you. God drops off the laws in sealed blood on a mountain in a blaze of fire and smoke. Talking snakes in the Garden of Eden. A God that creates plagues, famine and deluges, and has Moses, which is a title not a name, darkening the skies for 3 days. Then we have the parting of the ocean, so let the good guys get across and then closing up for the bad guys. People walking on water, the list goes on. And they call us conspiracy theorists. This is beyond madness. And as stated previously, religion was created by the fake gods as an experiment to take humans further away from source. and our own inner connection to it, make everything external, pray to the sky for the Messiah or the gods to return, which too many of the people bought into, whilst they laughed at us hysterically and harvested us. Hi all, the next piece is called The Rise of Zionism, which is like a modern day term for something long in the past. But Zionism was established with the political goal of creating a Jewish state in order to create a nation where Jews could be the majority, as stated by the founder, rather than them being the minority in which they were in a variety of nations in the diaspora. Now the word is taken from the Hill of Zion, which was not in Jerusalem until the recent expansionism program. But if that expansionism is left unchecked, it will go from the Nile to India, which is why we're getting all the interest in Iran. Theodor Herzl, Herzl, was the founder and father of Zionism, it was said, and he considered anti-Semitism to be an eternal feature of all societies in which Jews lived as minorities, and that only a separation could allow Jews to escape eternal prosecution or persecution. Negating the fact that these peoples have been used and have caused strife in every country, anywhere where a large number of them congregate. The facts don't lie. They've been thrown out of 106 countries in the last 2,000 years alone. These are the people that were thrown out of Egypt. They were thrown out of the Garden of Eden. Even the Mormons were thrown out of 3 places before they landed in Salt Lake. So it would suggest that they are part of the problem, or the political arm that's pushing these Jewish people into these regions, was they're not all Zionists, far from it. They're being used as a part of a program. Herzl said this, quote, "Let them give us sovereignty over a piece of the earth's surface, just sufficient for the needs of our people, then we will do the rest!" Exclamation mark. The exclamation mark said it all, really. Exposing the plan. And yes, and given past history, once they arrive in that place, they take over other pieces of land, which directly leads to the people turning against them, like what happened in Palestine. Now, Herzl proposed 2 possible destinations to colonize: Argentina, no surprise there, and Palestine. He preferred Argentina for its vast and sparsely populated territory and also temperate climate, but conceded that Palestine would have greater attraction because of the alleged historic ties of Jews with that area. The historic ties are not with Jews. The historic ties are Israelites out of Egypt. He also accepted to evaluate Joseph Chamberlain's proposal for a possible Jewish settlement in Great Britain's Eastern African colony named Uganda. So suddenly we have 3 regions that were all propped up, and 2 of them were owned by Britain: Palestine and Uganda. And was Jerusalem builded here? Oh my. Now, in the 17th century, Sabbatai Zevi 1626 to 1676, announced himself as the new Messiah and gained many Jews to his side and forming a base in Salonika, Greece. You will not be surprised to know that this city was destroyed by fire back in 1917, that time period again. It's funny how whole cities just spontaneously burn down at different epochs in time, isn't it? False flags, as they are called, goes much further back in time. The term false flag is a kind of curious term in and of itself, is it not? Now, the modern term that a false flag is a covert operation designed to deceive. But it originated as something completely different and is also indicative, because originally it referred to pirate ships, core pirates, that flew flags of countries as a disguise to prevent their victims from fleeing or preparing for battle. Now, sometimes the flag would remain and the blame for the attack be laid incorrectly on another country. Oh my, the implications behind that is far-reaching, as we know. Now, Herzl tried to establish a settlement in Gaza, but later moved to Smyrna in Turkey, after deposing the old Rabbi Aaron Lepapa in the spring of 1666 in the Jewish community of Avignon, France, and was prepared to emigrate to the new kingdom. That 1666 date comes up again, doesn't it? When the establishment set fire to the whole of London and launched the Sestwi KV Act, whilst all the carnage was ensuing, a bit like the Patriot Act following 9/11. Now, the readiness of the Jews of the time to believe the messianic claims of Sabbatai Zevi may largely be explained of the desperate state of Central European Jewry back in the mid-17th century. There was the pogroms of Bohdan Khmelnytsky, modern-day Ukraine, latterly Polish and Lithuanian, had wiped out 1/3 of the Jewish population and destroyed many centres of Jewish learning and communal life. I would suspect that these were the descendants of the Genghis Khan tribe that attacked Russia 400 years earlier. They just migrated west. Now, in the 19th century, a surge in Judaism supporting a return to Zion grew in popularity, particularly in Europe, where anti-Semitism and hostility towards Jews was growing. Why? Because they'd taken over the banks and businesses is why, and the taxes. This has gone on, this banking control of countries, for hundreds of years. And you can't just wipe it away by saying that's anti-Semitic. The facts are the facts. Now, the idea of returning to Palestine was rejected by the conferences of rabbis held in that time period. Rejected? Why would the rabbis reject going back to their so-called homeland? But individual efforts supported by the emigration of groups of Jews to Palestine, the pre-Zionist Aliyah, even before 1897, the year considered to be the start of practical Zionism. Now, the Reformed Jews rejected this idea of a return to Zion at the Conference of Rabbis in Frankfurt, Germany, back in 1845. They also deleted from the ritual all prayers for return to Zion and a restoration of a Jewish state. Interesting term they use for their service, ritual, given we know what happens in the rituals of the past. And also it proves there was a substantial political Jewish element established in Germany 100 years before Hitler, who, like in France, were wielding political power over the host country. Now from Germany the theatre switched to America, and the Philadelphia Conference in 1869 followed the lead of the German rabbis and decreed that the messianic hope of Israel is, quote, the union of all the children of God in the confession of the unity of God, whatever that means. Then in the Pittsburgh Conference 1885 reiterated the messianic idea of Reformed Judaism, expressing in a resolution that, quote, we consider ourselves no longer a nation, but a religious community, and therefore we expect neither a return to Palestine nor a sacrificial worship under the sons of Aaron, Mormon reference again, nor the restoration of any of the laws concerning a Jewish state, unquote. That type of rhetoric coming from the Pittsburgh Conference clearly didn't please or was replicated by the Zionist elites, because the Jewish people were stating that they're going to stay a religious community and therefore didn't expect to return to Palestine nor a sacrificial worship under the sons of Aaron. So they were going to dismiss the sacrifice. Now, moral but not practical efforts were made in Prague to organise a Jewish emigration by Abraham Benish and Moritz Steinschneider in 1835. In the United States, Mordecai Noah, nice name there, attempted to establish a Jewish refuge in Buffalo, New York on Grand Isle in 1825. And these early Jewish nation building efforts of Cresson, Benish, Steinschneider and Noah all failed. Interesting name, Mordecai, as it features in Jewish culture and also the Hebrew Bible. Mordecai resided in Iran, and he adopted his cousin and brought her up as his own daughter. She is known as Esther, and is a popular reading within the Jewish community. But let's look more closely at the name Mordecai and its meaning. In Hebrew, the meaning of the name Mordecai is warrior, follower and worshipper of Marduk. Ding! In the 1890s, Theodor Herzl infused Zionism with a new ideology and practical urgency, and so the change began, leading to the first Zionist Congress at Bâle in 1897, which then created the World Zionist Organization, in Switzerland again as the host of a major organization or body. The neutral Swiss, my ass they are. The Russian Empire, with its long record, it was stated, of state-organized genocide and ethnic cleansing, which widely regarded as the historic enemy of the Jewish people. I'm not surprised the Russian Empire is regarding the Jewish people as something to be rid of, given that they totally genocided them several times throughout history. None more so than in the last century, 70 to 90 million Russians were genocided by this same Israelite Zionist cult. In fact, Russia over time has been attacked more than any other country on this planet. But it seems only one country or peoples is allowed to play the victim here. Now, the Zionist movement's headquarters was located in Berlin, as many of its leaders were German Jews who spoke German. And given Russia's anti-Semitism at the start of World War I, most Jews and Zionists supported Germany in its war with Russia. You can't make this stuff up. Yes, they were setting the Germans up nicely for the fall. They'd already crushed Russia with the fake Bolshevik revolution that was supposedly done by Russians. It wasn't. It was done by Zionists. Now, this proves two things. The Jewish Zionist establishment was wielding power, and they were playing both sides of the war, with the goal to destroy the white race again. Now, people can deny it all they like, but the evidence in this series is beyond overwhelming. This also supports the piece in From Russia with Love 4, whereby I put forward that the Germans were duped and the SS was actually two factions altogether. In 1903, the British Colonial Secretary Joseph Chamberlain offered Herzl 5,000 square miles in Uganda Protectorate for a Jewish settlement called the Uganda Scheme, and it was introduced the same year to the World Zionist Organization Congress at its sixth meeting, whereby quite a fierce debate ensued. Now, some groups felt that accepting the scheme would make it more difficult to establish a Jewish state in Palestine, and the African land was described as an antechamber to the Holy Land. Now, lobbying by Russian Jewish immigrant Chaim Weizmann, together with fear that American Jews would encourage the USA to support Germany in the war against the communist Russia, culminated in the British government's Balfour Declaration in 1917. See how they all push it towards one goal. So as you can see, they were playing the Americans, the Germans and the Brits throughout this whole episode, with Rothschilds and other banker buddies playing a lead role in it at this time, along with the Zionist organization. Here's something his story fails to get across or mention, and could be a key piece as to why things got real ugly for some of the Jewish people in Germany. All orchestrated by the people who don't give a rat's arse about their plight, and they just use them to insert them into places to cause mayhem on their behalf. In 1927, Ukrainian Jew Yitzhak Lamdan wrote an epic poem titled Masada to reflect the plight of the Jews and calling for the last stand. Now, upon the German adoption of the swastika, which is actually dotted all over the landscape of Russia, like the Nazca lines, I might add, there's hundreds of them, which is dating back thousands of years. Theodor Newman Kaufman, hell-bent on provoking a race war and eliminating his perception of, quote, inbred Germanism, unquote, published Germany Must Perish, anti-German articles, such as the Daily Express in the UK, calling for an anti-Nazi boycott in response to German anti-Semitism. All of that was published prior to Adolf Hitler's rise. Somebody who's in technically somebody else's country, given we're all into that thing, you know, I'm British, I'm American, and this and that. But the Jewish people do not originate from Germany. And they're going in and calling Germans inbreeds. Destroying their businesses. Inflation went through the roof. What was 4 German marks to a British pound went to 20,000. That particular article has given rise to a so-called conspiracy theory that it was it that started the anti-Jewish in Germany. That the Jews themselves started the so-called Holocaust. But it's typical, the conspiracy theory always pops up when a narrative makes more sense than their official story. But think about that for a second. If a load of Hispanics rose up in America and said death to Americans and called them all inbreeds, you would expect some sort of backlash, would you not? Just like the agency paid actors going around America and Canada demanding Sharia law. You don't think that's their own belief, do you? They're being paid to do so. Why? Because it generates a response of hatred. It's problem, reaction and solution tactics again. And this is something the Jewish people in general have chronically overlooked in any sort of critical thinking way. That oversight has cost them many of their peoples, orchestrated by leading elites of their so-called own people. And they need to act. The rest of the people will support them over time when we all realise we have a common enemy. With the German invasion of Russia in 1941, Stalin, who was a Jew, reversed his long-standing opposition to Zionism, see how they always flip it from one to the other, and tried to mobilise the worldwide Jewish support for the Soviet war effort. But his public stance was fake. Stalin was a Zionist all along with Lenin and Marx. There was a Jewish anti-fascist committee was set up in Moscow after many thousands of Jewish refugees fled the Nazis and entered the Soviet Union during the war, where they reinvigorated Jewish religions activities and opened up new synagogues, oblivious to the fact that that country or its people may not like that on its own soil. Do people not understand that? It causes division. Revisionist Zionists, led by Zeev Jabotinsky, believe that Zionism is a colonizing adventure, really, and therefore stands or falls by the question of armed forces, he said. It is important to build, it is important to speak Hebrew, but unfortunately it is even more important to be able to shoot, or else I'm through with playing at colonization. Again, overlooking the fact that it's their own people that's getting killed. because of these psychopath policies. He went on to say, and confirms what I put out in parts 1 and 2 of this series with this comment. Although the Jews originated in the East, yes, India, they belonged to the West culturally, morally and spiritually. So Zionism was conceived by Jabotinsky as part of the return of the Jews to their spiritual homeland, it is said. Not as a return of the Jews to their spiritual homeland, but as an offshoot or implant, nice wording, of Western civilization in the East. But with sycophants like this, they were never going to belong anywhere. And this is what the Jewish people have to grasp. You have been shunted around this world based on a fake story in a fake book, written by these very clowns, not by God, Jesus, or Jehovah, or Yahweh, and pushed into countries at alarming rates, and once they arrived there in sufficient numbers, the subversion of the locals' policy and cultures ensured your stay there was never pleasant and really elongated. This next song says it all and will lead us into the next piece, and it also references what I mentioned earlier, the badge of priesthood. First we take Manhattan, then we take Berlin. Start talking about the fall of the wall. Who knows? The penultimate chapter of this part 5 is New York and its role in the cult. I may go into more about New York in later episodes. This is an interesting piece that will bring home and connect a lot more dots. And so it was to pass that the Fourth Reich was to be in America, and one city in particular, which I've referenced several times in many recent shows. All the elites and their programs, all born in New York, and all born to Jewish parents. It comes up far too often for it to be a coincidence. Or was it Cohen? I never thought of that. Cohen. Maybe I'll have to look at that word now. Like Jerry Epstein. From Facebook to Disney CEOs, Nexium, to the bankers of the UN, the Federal Reserve, Wall Street, the Vanderbilts, the Koch brothers, both Dutch, signifying New York's past, which was New Amsterdam, Rockefellers, Lehmans, Kuhn Loeb, Citadel, Hillary Clinton, and a whole range of bloodline families, and the mafia all in one city, which has been dubbed Jew York. A place for me personally that would be the last place I would visit in America. The energies there must be shocking. Remember, it was this same city that brought in the slaves from around the world. The same city that brought us Ellis Island and all the horrors of that. And the lesser known Castle Garden, which was a fort. The same region that brought us Long Island and Montauk, MK Ultra, and the heinous National Zionist experiments there. Like I said, most Nazis were not German. Nazi is National Zionism, the same people who created communism. Nothing to do with Russia or China or Vietnam for that matter. Long Island was also the site of the plasma weapons that Cobra still burbles on about. That was dealt with back in 2014, around the same time as George Herbert Walker Bush died, incidentally. Not forgetting America's darkest day in history, when the media conspiracy theory ends and they tell the full truth of that day. More people will understand this series, because it lays it all out throughout history that led up to that fateful day, which was another sacrifice offering to their fake gods. The 9/11 Twin Towers went from Joachim and Boaz to the Osiris symbolism, with the light in the sky. The only thing missing is the Batman symbol. There is a reason why they call it Gotham. But to denigrate all New Yorkers because of a few cultists is as stupid as blaming all Germans for Nazism. We have to see beyond who is pushed forward as the blame and get to the hidden element. Like I've said previously, there was two SS and their modus operandi were distinctly different, suggesting in From Russia with 4 some leading Germans were duped. Don't believe that yet? Perhaps this next sentence might raise some concerns and eyebrows. The song that the Hitler Youth sang was a German folk song called Tomorrow Belongs to Me, that predates the Nazi era. It was adapted and slightly altered for the musical Cabaret in 1966. It was actually written by 2 Jews, Fred Ebb and John Kander. I mean, you can't make this shit up. Fred Ebb, born in New York, born to Jewish parents. John Kander, born in Missouri, born to Jewish parents. In 1880s also began the rise of New York becoming the centre of the cult of Ra, and the transfer of Cleopatra's Needle, which is an obelisk symbolising the penis of Osiris. It was Osiris who taught the humans how to make beer, I might add, entrapping them into the spirit world, where the demons waited with bated breath. The penis of Osiris was missing after Set, god of Saturn, chopped into pieces in another of those family wars the gods are now famous for, like Cain and Abel, Anu and Alulu, who is the real king of the Draco, and also Marduk, who was exiled by Anu, and they split up Midgard into 5 regions, and because he didn't get the prize region, which is now the Middle East, replete with all the space sports, he got pissy. The word obelisk literally means Baal's shaft. Remember, Baal, like Moses and Ra, is a title, not a person. The obelisk is the symbol of the penis, and why the tallest one here in America, all 555 feet, is facing the Oval Office in DC. The Oval Office is symbolising the vagina. This is all done by design, and you can guarantee it's placed very carefully so the shadow of the penis at a certain date will enter the Oval Office, the vagina, at some point. This is how these people think and act. It's all hidden in plain sight, and a vast majority of people cannot see what's right in front of them. In From Russia with Love 3 we discussed Cleopatra, Alexandra, and they were the links of the real exodus of Egypt into the houses of Europe, which then set the stage using largely the Dutch house, first to conquer America, via the Vanderbilts, House of Orange, etc. And like I said, remember, New York was originally called New Amsterdam. All ran by the Dutch East and West Indies Company, which predates the British one by 60 years. Now, Cleopatra's Needle was situated in Alexandria and had resided there for nearly 3,000 years, and then was transported from Egypt to New York in June 1880 and was erected, pardon the pun, in Central Park, February 1881. Essentially and symbolically, this represented the planting of the seed. The new foundations were set, the equivalent of planting a flag, most of which are false anyway. Stars and Stripes was modelled by a Brit and represented the crown and its colonies, anchoring it to their New World Order phallic symbol. Don't believe me? Go and check it out. Stating, with this penis we hereby declare we are about to metaphorically fuck a whole new set of peoples, having done so everywhere else. The fact that it was placed in the park by the name of Central should not be lost on the listener either. It's not a coincidence. The ceremony was conducted to assembly, predictably by one group, as it is they who spread their cult via secrecy, the Freemasons. Jesse B. Anthony, the Grand Master of Masons in the state of New York, presided as the cornerstone of the obelisk was laid in place with full Masonic ceremony on October 2nd, 1880. Over 9,000 Masons paraded up Fifth Avenue from 14th to 82nd Street, and it was estimated that over 50,000 spectators lined the parade route. Just like the cornerstone in the Mecca cube is symbolic, this Freemasonic ritual is the same thing. Mecca is linked to the gods on Sirius B, and no, they're not good, far from it. And it is laying the foundation and stamping its authority over that region, and quite frankly, New York was never the same again. It says it all in the scriptures. Peter. For in scripture it says, "See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame." So all you have to do is trust in the Lord, Yahweh, Ra, or Anu, and you can never have any shame. It's a bit like the Day of Atonement and the Day of Judgment in the Jewish holiday, is it not? Same thing. New York was designated as the New Zion, protocols and all. The meaning of protocol in one form is diplomatic rules of etiquette. This, in layman's terms, means we are going to tell you what we're doing, and it's not your fault or our fault, you're too stupid not to see it. With the reductionism in knowledge and the secrecy within hidden fraternal brotherhoods, the symbolism and the deliverance of messages uttered by the protocols of Zion, and then you add in the message from Israel Cohen, was lost to many outside of the inner circle. Why do you think it was the final chapter of the takeover of the world by these cult of Ra dark magicians? Let's look at the hieroglyph translations on one side of the needle to get some greater clarity of what this all entails for us. The crowned Horus, there's that name again, tall with the southern crown loving Ra, the king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Menkeper Ra, Tutmosis III, signifying that Tut, the third, was the latest version of Moses, which is a title. The golden Horus, content with victory, who smiteth the rulers of nations, hundreds of thousands, inasmuch as Father Ra hath ordered unto him victory against every land, gathered together the valour of the scimitar in the palm of his hands, to broaden the bounds of Egypt. Son of the Son, Tutmosis III, who giveth all life forever. That's what you've got in the middle of Central Park. To broaden the bounds of Egypt. Nothing to do with Jews, nothing to do with Israel. Horus, who killed hundreds of thousands like his father Ra, ordered victory of every land to broaden the bounds of Egypt. And this is what this series has been telling you, and it's all there in Central Park, New York, telling us all they intend to take over every land. And this is why so much bad comes out of that one city. The parade organised by the Jewish Order in 1919, again in New York, the float made out of German helmets in the shape of a pyramid. All Egypt references again. The cornerstone of the New World Order, declared in America 1776, with New York at the centre of it, aided by Switzerland, Holland, Britain and the Vatican, and the false country named Israel. Having delved deeper into this cult, a new name emerges, conjures up thinking patterns of the term and meaning of hive-minded. Given their occult magic background, that name is the Hivites. I have named them the cult of Ra, but it appears this is their hidden name. Of course, they have many other names: Freemasons, Roman Catholics, Muslim Brotherhood, CIA, Khazarian, Ashkenazi, Illuminati, Mormon, Scientologist, ISIS, Antifa, KKK, Democrat, Luciferian, Deep State or Shadow Government. But this is who they are known as in private. This cult has been on a rampaging path of desecrating all things white, all things Rus and all things Aryan, using the black and Jewish race as their guinea pigs to push racial division, create a new history that the whites were responsible for slavery, as From Russia with Love 4 proved. In the last 100 years, they've all but killed most of the Rus in Russia, then set about creating their next stage of operation, the country of Germany, which was used as a vehicle in World War II, creating the division of Aryan peoples between Russia and Germany. Add in Poland, the now Baltic states and all the Slavic countries, and it turned into a bloodbath. This led to the creation of the state of Israel, and then on to America, which is what they've stated all along. At the end of the war via Project Paperclip and Nazis, which is National Zionism, like I keep saying, I will keep saying it, because it has to stick in people's heads. National Zionism is not German at all, but the Kalimar Israelite cult of Ra peoples, Zionists. Like I intimated, there were two plots running side by side in Germany before and during World War II. The Jews were being persecuted, we are told, but then another piece is they were supporting Germany during the war. Why would these said peoples be supporting a country who's allegedly harassing them and then genociding them? It doesn't make any sense. Why, if everything is Jewish, Hebrew and Israel, why do they have an obsession with all things Egypt? Because they are from that region is why, having been thrown out of the Garden of Eden in India.
Woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil sends the beast with wrath, because he knows the time is short. Let him who hath understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666.
Hi all, and welcome back to the final part of tonight's show. Someone's just posted the Mecca, and I did a piece recently about why they built bowl stadiums, apart from the superb owl, which is Moloch. It's to create a vortex of energy that swirls around and reaches the next plane, which they feed off the energy. What do the Muslim people do at Mecca? They swirl around in a circle, which creates the vortex that goes up. Not good. So, having established the New World Order in America, how did they take over government? Is the final piece, which will lead us into part 6, of which is about 80% ready, of more names and more dot connecting of who was involved and the various organisations that have trampled all of the American people. So this final piece is the role of AIPAC. You want to know how you lost your country? This will make it clear. AIPAC is a lobbying group, it says, that advocates pro-Israel policies to the Congress and executive branch of the United States, which is not America, remember, and are described as a group, an organisation that supports and promotes the interests of Zionism in the United States, not Israel, not Jewish people, Zionism. Big difference. And one of the several pro-Israel lobbying organisations in the United States, AIPAC, states it has more than 100,000 members, 17 regional offices, and a vast pool of donors. It is said that this group does not raise funds for political candidates itself, which is a lie, but its members raise money for candidates through political action committees AIPAC helped establish and by other means. In other words, backdoor dealings. Its critics have stated it acts as an agent of the Israeli government with a stranglehold on the United States Congress with its power and influence, and the group has been accused of being strongly allied with the Likud Party of Israel, which is Mr. Nutty Asshole. AIPAC has won support from an overwhelming majority of Republican Jews, while J Street is presenting itself as an alternative for Democrats who have grown uncomfortable with both Netanyahu's policies and the Conservatives flocking to AIPAC. The classic case of playing both sides, which they said in the earlier piece, that they would play both sides. We will create an opposition, and we will own both. It says that in the covenant. Now, AIPAC came into existence in 1951, and it was established at the time because Israel needed American economic assistance. to enable her to absorb the huge influx of refugees who poured into the country soon after statehood. Yet again, America, becoming the cash cow and the financial heist imposed by the same Zionists under the Federal Reserve, continued to loot this country. The question is, why was America paying for it when it is a British Crown colony? To date, that country has received $109 billion in direct US aid and billions more in indirect aid. The founder was Isaiah Leo C. Kennan, who was a Canadian journalist. Yes, they're in Canada as well. Until 1951, Isaiah Kennan was registered as a foreign agent for the Israeli Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Israel Office of Information, according to the Department of Justice documents. Now, the Justice Department Foreign Agents Registration Act section ordered Kennan to continue registering as a foreign agent for Israel if he continued lobbying on its behalf. Kennan never complied with the order, but instead began working on public relations for the American Zionist Council. This shows you how much sway they have, where they can blatantly ignore the laws of this country and openly defy the Department of Justice. You've seen it all recently with the Comey Mueller stuff. Just trample all over it. In 2005, Lawrence Franklin, a Pentagon analyst, pled guilty to espionage charges of passing US government secrets to AIPAC Policy Director Stephen Rosen and AIPAC senior Iran analyst Keith Weissman in what is known as the AIPAC espionage scandal. Now, Rosen and Weissman were later fired by AIPAC, but in 2009 charges against the former AIPAC employees were dropped. Sound familiar? These Pentagon-approved meetings were brokered by a neoconservative Michael Ledeen. I've covered him before. I may cover him again, him and wife Barbara, of the American Enterprise Institute, who had also played a part in the Iran-Contra. It all connects, doesn't it? And is said to have taken place in Paris of June 2003. Michael and his wife Barbara were also involved in the Mueller investigation with General Flynn. Time moves on, but the same players run the same games. Now, the American government has only twice brought Espionage Act charges against non-government third parties. The AIPAC one just described, and the Ellsberg and Russo, whose parents were Jewish. The judge dismissed the latter case also. The judge said the FBI had lost the papers. And during the trial, the judge was offered the post of FBI director by John Ehrlichman, whose father was also Jewish. Like the current ongoing investigations, anything that relates back to Israel or supporters of the Zionists gets squashed, or papers and now emails go missing, and yet again involving the FBI. As of early 2019, AIPAC had 17 regional and satellite offices, a new headquarters near the capital, and in 2016 an annual budget sufficient to provide its chief executive, Howard Coher, with more than $1 million in salary and benefits per year. AIPAC spent $3.5 million lobbying in 2018, a relatively large sum in the realm of foreign policy, which was more than 10 times the other Israeli lobbyists known as J Streets. Thomas Dine developed a network to influence every member of Congress. The vital core of AIPAC membership, American Jews, while it would be illegal for AIPAC to raise money for political campaigns or to donate to candidates. Despite that, it is well known that AIPAC unofficially orchestrates campaign contributions by bringing together candidates it favours with large donors and bundlers, as it's called, and through a network of political action committees such as NORPAC, whose primary mission is to raise money for and to donate to political campaigns of favoured politicians. Cheryl Gay Stolzberg calls the system of key contacts AIPAC's secret, and quotes from activist Tom Dine as saying that AIPAC's office can call on 5 to 15 key contacts for every senator, including the standoffish ones. 5 to 15 influencers for every senator. They also organise carefully curated trips to Israel for legislators and other opinion makers, all expenses paid for by AIPAC's charitable arm. In 2005 alone, more than 100 members of Congress visited Israel, sometimes, some of them, multiple times. At colleges, it provides political leadership training to undergraduate student groups, so they're influencing in the schools. This is an effort to build a stronger pro-Israel movement among students on and off campuses nationwide. Now, American assistance to Israel serves vital US national security interests and advances critical US foreign policy goals, or so we're told. The military hardware Israel must purchase to face the increased threat of terrorism and Islamic radicalism is increasingly expensive due to the spike in petroleum prices. You all know about that, which have enabled countries such as Iran to augment their military budgets, according to COA. Of course, negating to mention that Netanyahu, along with the Bushes and other rogue elements, are all in on the act of stealing the oil. So this nonsense of escalated oil prices is pure distortion of the facts. Unlike America and Britain, who benefit from cheap or in some cases free oil, none of it is passed on to the peoples of that country. AIPAC has described as a major force in shaping United States policy in the Middle East that is able to push numerous bills through Congress. Typically, these pass by unanimous votes. A House of Representatives resolution condemning the UN Goldstone report on human rights violations in Gaza by Israel, for example, passed 344 to 36 to cancel it. One critic, former Congressman Brian Baird, who said he had admired Israel since I was a kid, but became alienated from AIPAC, complained that when key votes are cast, the question on the House floor, troublingly, is often not what is the right thing to do for the United States of America, but how is AIPAC going to score this? This is what your congressmen are doing in votes. What is best for AIPAC, not America? And he cited the 2009 House resolution. He opposed the condemning of the Goldstone report on civilian deaths. And he said, when we had the vote, I said, we have to, member after member, coming to the floor to vote on a resolution they've never read. Sound a bit like the Patriots Act. About a report they've never seen in a place they've never been to. And Baird worries that AIPAC members and supporters believe that they're supporting Israel when they are actually backing policies such as the killing of civilians in Gaza. If they're not going to read it, it makes them complicit to me. AIPAC has been criticised as being unrepresentative of American Jews who support Israel and support only of right-wing Israeli policy and viewpoints. A Pew Center poll found that 38% of American Jews believe that the Israeli government is sincerely pursuing peace. Just 38% believe Netanyahu is pursuing peace. 44% believe that the construction of new settlements damages Israel's national security. Me personally, I'm pleased to see those figures, as the Jewish people have to recognise these Zionists have got nothing to do with the Jewish people or the fake state they created. In 1992, AIPAC President David Steiner, that name again, was forced to resign after he was recorded boasting about his political influence in obtaining aid for Israel. Let the cat out of the bag, you see. Steiner also claimed that he had met with then Bush's US Secretary of State Jim Baker and had cut a deal with him. I got, besides the $3 billion a year, you know they're looking for the Jewish votes, and I'll tell him whatever he wants to hear. Besides the $10 billion in loan guarantees, which was a fabulous thing, $3 billion in foreign, in military aid, and I got almost $1 billion in other goodies that people don't even know about, unquote. $14 billion just went out the door, just so congressmen can get voted in by AIPAC. This is what we're dealing with here. It's a full takeover. Steiner also claimed to be negotiating with the incoming Clinton administration at the time over who Clinton would appoint as Secretary of State and Secretary of the National Security Agency. Steiner stated that AIPAC had 12 people in the Clinton campaign in the headquarters in Little Rock, and they're all going to get big jobs. Steiner left and set up a summer school internment program. I wonder if he's the descendant of Rudolf Steiner. Now, people can shout anti-Semitist all they like at this series, but right through it, I have warned and supported the Jewish people as they're being used as patsies in this insidious game. Just how is AIPAC or J Street allowed to prosper on our soil, infringe on our law, dictate policy, threaten and harass politicians, dictate when America goes to war? Out of a total of 5.3 million Jewish people in the whole country, of which only 10,000 Jewish people out of 5.3 million are participating in the military. And a fair few of them are in no doubt in high-ranking positions that doesn't require them to participate in the fighting. They leave that to the Goyim. How are they allowed to decide Middle East policy also, which has been disastrous for America as a nation, inserted into the FBI, CIA, DHS and NSA and destroy many people's lives via war, costing people jobs and also harvesting America of its finances. Never underestimate the role of AIPAC and its cohorts in what is and has gone wrong in this country, and the main reason why the country and the people in America are now universally mistrusted globally and in some countries hated upon. It's because of the policies of this Zionist filth. This Zionist filth has to be addressed. These entities are in part anti-human and not human. They care not for anyone, but a select few of themselves. They have raped, murdered, pillaged and sacrificed wherever they have gone, uprooted peoples globally, destroyed their culture, language and traditions, and duped billions of people into following their fake god. The damage this cult has done goes back over 100,000 years of history on this planet, and it needs to be addressed by all countries, as they have, like a virus, permeated everywhere. And until it is dealt with by all peoples, whether black, brown, red or yellow, most importantly the white race, as proven these people have hunted and stunted the white race down. But last but not least, the Jewish people also. As proven in previous episodes, when Mr. Begin and also the Rothschilds family had two separate offers to remove all Jewish people out of the camps, they refused. And we are all under this threat to these psychopaths until they are finally dealt with. Then all colours can move on in a more peaceable and caring world. This has been From Russia with Love Part 5. My name's Thomas Williams.